You good to go, Bruce?
Thank you, appreciate that. Good morning, people. Welcome. Oh, well done, Nobby. You're done? You're in stitches. No, you're no longer in stitches. That's right, okay. Welcome back, Nobby. And look, you're timely. Welcome back to and I'll declare our meeting of the 27th of September of the Risk Insurance Committee open. And I asked Ross why he's wearing a tie, and he said it was in recognition. It was the last
Alex
meeting.
says she's not getting any audio, sorry.
Sorry?
There was a message from Alex to say she wasn't getting any audio.
I wonder if somebody could just have a look at that, please, and I would like to just keep moving on. I was only going to make the slight jest that...
Bruce, can you just bring your mic closer and see? But I think
how's that? Can you hear me now, Alex?
She's muted.
We'll see what we can do.
Okay, perhaps I'll just keep going. It's largely the formalities at this stage. Thank you. All I was wanting to... Thank you, Rangi. all I was wanting to reflect was Ross recognised the gravitas as our last meeting for the triennium, and I've had the habit, because I've gone to a number of these in the course of the last 2 weeks. I would like to, before we get into the meeting and before we even close Ops and OPEX, I just would like to thank you and the staff for the course of the last triennium. We do have an agenda item later looking at an assessment of the committee, and we will deal with that thoroughly, but I want to just recognise you and your staff and the way in which they have serviced the committee over the course of the last 3 years, and my appreciation for what I think I could even say, prefacing that discussion we'll have later, an improving set of papers, and actually therefore what the committee can do in the way of its work. We still have definitely some progress to make, but it's been great, and I just wanted to pass on my appreciation as chair for the hard yards of you and your staff, and the way in which we've been able to conduct work here in the risk committees. So I hope we're keen to continue that in the new triennium, but as I say with that, I have to say that with a risk of having self-interest as far as that's concerned. But look, thank you for that, and it's great to be here this morning, and we will make a start. All the items are important, but I want to reflect that when we get to PX, there's clearly a critical piece, and this is why the timing of this meeting was now, was to consider where we are with our draft financials. And again, I want to reflect that Patricia and her team have done a stellar work to get us to a certain position, but we are keen to leave a position that the new council and the new triennium can pick up. So that's the key thing, although, as I say, I can't dismiss that in relationship to, say, a health and safety paper or the likes. So that's all very important. So with that, I'd like to make a start, please. Can I firstly just check we've got Alex on Zoom? Do anybody else, Malavika? Is Alex able to hear us now?
Yes, she is.
Great. Let's welcome Alex. Good that you can be here. I don't think we've got any apologies. People keep asking me how long I'm going to make this meeting for, but I'll try and make it before anybody else has to go.
Sorry, Bruce, I believe it's Worship the Mayor.
Oh, right.
Apology.
Thank you. So look, I'll move from the chair that we sustain Sir Tim's apology. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Rangi. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Any matters of interest on the papers coming up? I don't imagine there is, so that's great. I haven't been informed of anybody from the public wishing to speak to us. I'd like to move a motion that we receive a major late item, which for those of you that have been following your diligent books will realise has been the insertion of the 2022 draft annual report, which is now in your books. We need that to be able to consider an item in PX. So from the chair, I'd like to move that we receive this major late item. Thank you, Darren. Any discussion? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. I'd also like to move a minor late item, and it's a verbal briefing that I've asked Patricia to give us around a matter associated with rates, and she's just going to brief us on that in PX is what I would like. So it's a verbal item. There have been no papers or preset papers. The nature of the item is one for advice before any paper could be prepared. So I will move that a minor late item in relationship to rates be tabled at our PX session. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Bex. Any discussion on the motion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. There are no other changes as I have it to the agenda or indeed the timing. Sorry, the order. Right. If we can then move to the first item, please. Sorry, I was all, in the wrong area. Peter, well done. I knew you'd be up first, so if you could lead off while I find myself back to my...
Morning.
my-
You've got the minutes. You've got the minutes.
There we go. Thank you.
You want to do the minutes?
Sorry, thank you. So we've got the minutes of our meeting on the 25th of August. I'll move from the chair that the minutes are confirmed. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Rangi.
Second.
All those in favour, please say aye.
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 The motion is carried. Sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble with my system here. Right, thank you. If we could move to the, I'll get there. If we move to the health and safety report, Peter, the longer you introduce, the quicker, the more time I have to get myself on the right agenda. No, seriously, could you please give us the salient points of your report? Thank you.
Apart from the recommendations, I'd just like to note the table at the top of page 16 of your report and the increase in reporting of no treatment incidents and near miss incidents. I'd actually take these as being a positive, that we're actually reporting an increase of reporting and we're making it easier to report incidents so we can act on them. So although it may look like a bit of a negative, I take that as a positive change in our culture.
Through you, Chair. Peter, I guess anecdotally those incidents have been happening all the time. It's just people are now realising that they've got to report them.
Yes.
Thank you.
Go back. Thank you, Darren. Yes, Rangi.
It was just really about the terminology used, and I noticed a few companies around town, this near miss is actually, when they're looking at accidents and stuff like that, it's actually not a near miss, it's actually a near hit.
Oh.
It's actually, you know, the near miss, it actually is a miss that saved them. So I'm just wondering, are we using the right terminology with near misses? It just doesn't.
Same as everyone else.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem to make real sense to me about when you're talking about accidents.
Well, I mean, a near miss is meant to be what it is, which is in fact a near miss. Hello, thank
it's
you,
a
Erin.
near.
Go for it. I got
Yeah.
some proper advice over here.
Sorry, Chair, I'm happy just to expand a little bit on that. The council is right in that there is definitely part of that near miss terminology that includes a near hit, but near misses are broader than that. Near misses are really those lead indicators of something that might have just gone minorly wrong that tells us that there could have been an accident. Some of the examples that I've seen of really good near miss reporting are as small as one of the crews went to drive out of the lot and a broom has fallen off the back of a truck. Really minor thing, but it just reminds the team around, I haven't checked that everything was secured on my load before I left. Next time it could have been, you know, quite a significant piece of plant or something that wasn't secured and could have fallen off and caused a major accident. So it is quite broad in that near miss, and we really do encourage the teams to be reporting all of those little things. If we can manage the little things, then we really get ahead of managing and stopping those big things.
So in regards with WorkSafe, who are the people who police this stuff, is that the terminology they
Absolutely.
use? Right, yeah, okay. I suppose if our policing people are using that terminology, then
I mean, I would. It's probably urban myth I'm passing on, Rangi, but in one of our committees we discuss what should be. You know, is there a, without it sounding like there should be a ratio? Is there a ratio between near miss and actual incidences? And looking at a WorkSafe program or health and safety program, the answer is that ideally you would have a good number of near misses but no accidents. We talked about a ratio of 30-1. That's the urban myth part. Don't take that as gospel, but I think that's actually the reality of actually what we are trying to encourage is actually a culture of concern for yourself, obviously, but also your fellow worker, and consequently, reporting of near misses tends to be a reasonable sign of culture and a chance, as you've said, Aaron, to get on top of things. So I think we should be encouraging good reporting, appropriate reporting of near misses, because it's indicative that people have got the message. Other questions for Peter, please? Thanks, Nobby.
Just two issues. WorkSafe New Zealand does use the terminology near misses, but this column we got here seems to me to be out of place, because normally when you look at stats for health and safety, you look at things like accidents, and they break them down into the severity of accidents, but they also include incidents and near misses. And what we've got here is we've got a set of pylons there that's talking about the treatment or the consequences for the employee as opposed to what the accident actually was. For me, that near miss should be in another cluster somewhere else, which talks about serious accidents, moderate accidents, mild accidents, goes on to things like right down to the very end to the near misses. That's normally the cluster you have it in. What we've got there is actually the consequence, I guess, of the incident or the near miss.
I think that's why, look, perhaps Peter, you can take that advice. This looks like a relatively standard set of categorisations, Nobby, but Peter, perhaps on the face of the wee bit of discussion around the categorisation, you could just check what is appropriate, please. I mean, I think this is one of the reasons I was going to comment, Nobby, that those first four columns are treated as lag indicators. They're obviously past events, important though they are, whereas the near miss tends to be treated as a lead indicator. That if you don't get that broom that falls off, it could be something more serious going forward. So that's why they've had that differences. But I hear your point about the treatment. So Peter, if I could ask you, as we keep going, whether there's any refinement to this reporting. Otherwise, you know, it is what I think is reasonably standard. Thanks, Nobby. Any other points from folk? I've got a couple of questions, please, Peter, and it might be as much to the senior management that are in the room. Firstly, my deep appreciation that you guys have all got out and had a look around. I wonder if there's any broader messages, and perhaps I'm looking your way, Claire, or down my right-hand side here, broader messages that you've taken out of getting out there and doing health and safety checks.
Look, I think there are always three broader messages that we get out of due diligence visits. The first is just that sense of understanding exactly how the business is done by the people that are doing it, and they certainly appreciate our inquiries, our support, and our greater understanding. We've seen some improvements come as a result, and I think we've also had a good understanding of some of their challenges and health and safety issues that they may be facing. You'll see in the visit that I made to Bluff, actually it was a reflection of what a cash business in Bluff, and how unusual geographically it is that if there was an incident there. So it led me to have a conversation with head of police, and there's been and of course there was already a relationship, but it's now been slightly formalised. I think that Steve Gibling's taken a real interest in health and safety, and actually has been driving a bit more, chairing the corporate health and safety committee, and driving a bit more conversation around all parties as to what we can learn to contribute to health and safety and what we learn from health and safety for the rest of the business. Brilliant.
Well, actually, Claire, you anticipated my second question. So, Steve, I'm looking your way. I was just wondering how these visits were then, you know, in a sense, being passed on to the Health and Safety Committee, who, after all, are our lead group. So any comments you'd like to make, Steve, I'd welcome those.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, in terms of the Health and Safety Committee, there is a relationship between the ELT visits. We're also using the skill of the committee to do deep dives into some of our critical risks that, as an organisation, we have identified, and so we've focused on lone worker policy and driving in the last 2 months, where they've all sat around and really pulled apart the pre and post mitigation, and are we happy, and then how we then as a system influence the changes at our individual frontline level. So, for example, when we get in the car, we know to do checks. We familiarise ourselves of the car before we start driving, rather than whilst we're driving. And that's provided greater engagement with the health and safety reps. We've increased the number of people around that table in the last 2 months as well. So we've got broader representation, not only at our frontline areas, which are traditionally good, which is parks and recreation, for example, as one example, but we've also got more representation from the CAB building. And just lifting that standard, both in terms of awareness and communication, and then making sure that there's alignment at all levels of our organisation.
Great. Thank you for that, Steve. That's helpful. Members, can we encourage you to listen to these, what I think are growing understanding of the essentially health and safety system, because of our need as officers to be aware of the system. So, Steve, appreciate that. A bit of our comfort's based on your hard work. So thank you for that, and thank you to the senior team for getting out and looking there. Peter, the other question I'll leave as my last one is, thank you for including third-party contractors. Again, we're back to perhaps the sort of diagram we've discussed before, but interesting to read that. Was there anything that you wanted to make or comment, perhaps, Erin, it could even be you, around our third-party contractor health and safety environment, given they're a combined PCBU for us?
Not for myself.
No? Erin, is there anything that you wanted to add at this stage?
Thank you, Chair. I think the key piece for us is that we're on a little bit of a journey in terms of improving our health and safety as an organisation. We're definitely at the point where I think we are getting better at our oversight of our contractors, and therefore becoming more aware of things as they are happening, and that ability to prevent, get hold of something while it's minor and prevent a major issue. So to the point that was made earlier, sometimes the reporting of incidents is going up. It's not necessarily that the incidents are occurring more often, but that level of PCBU oversight is actually improving, and we're able to manage those issues more effectively.
Great. Look, and I said that was my last question, Peter, but I just wanted to ask one, shall we say, dumb question. It's actually ignorance on my part. At the Clifton wastewater plant, what is a lockout tag?
So a lockout is, I guess, a key industry safety process that is used where basically you want to make sure that while somebody's working on perhaps a pump or an electrical system, that somebody doesn't come along and accidentally turn it on and crush somebody's fingers in a pump. So that's the issue of making sure that actually something is locked out with a key, and quite often multiple keys will need to unlock that, so you can make sure that everybody has done the work that they need to do before things are turned back on.
Brilliant. I thought that was, thank you. I thought that was it, but I'm glad you confirmed. Yes, Rangi.
It's just about clarity with health and safety here. We are talking about the health and safety of our staff and the way they carry out work. Is that right? It's not our facilities in relationship to public use and health and safety of the public using them?
Primarily it relates to health and safety for our employees, but it does obviously also move over into the area of public safety as well. So places like Splash Palace, etc.
And Queen's Park, etc. Yeah. Okay. No, just something yesterday when I was walking in Queen's Park, where we've chopped down the trees in Kelvin Street, and they've had access, they've put dunlite, the big concrete, a big large chippy surface on the walk path along the Kelvin Street side, and you just roll your ankle easily as anything on there. It's suitable for vehicles. I can see why they use it, heavy vehicles, but as a walking path, it is a nightmare, and that's currently in use. It's not, it used to be coned off, but that's currently and access for people wearing all sorts of shoes. So I mean, I would have to raise that as a health and safety public thing. Yeah.
Yep, it looks
Yeah,
like
no,
Steve's writing a note there.
Yes, noted. Thank you.
Right. It's just So yeah.
Right, Nobby.
Just a couple of issues here. Rangy's quite right, because the public stuff comes in under our PCBU obligations. So that's persons conducting a business unit. You can't just look at your own staff. You've got to look at the people that are legitimately using the service that you provide. The other issue for me was the issue of, like, it's great that the management are doing what they're doing. I mean, not a lot of organisations do that sort of deep dive stuff. But what I don't seem to get in these reports is what's being raised by way of routine stuff. And I'm not saying that should be in every report, but maybe we should have a catch up somewhere along the line, because normally speaking, you have sort of different layers of dealing with health and safety. You do, obviously the management go out and do their bit. But there's also the health and safety reps that are doing their routine stuff. That might be weekly, monthly, whatever. And then you do post-incident stuff. So as you have an accident or near miss, you go in and look a bit closer. So a good example of that would be that if somebody was routinely not wearing eyeglasses and had an incident, you'd go and dive in and you'd find that people were getting a bit lax on that, so you do a bit more training. But if they weren't wearing earmuffs, you don't get an incident or an ear miss. You just end up with long-term damage to your hearing. And so some of those stuffs are often missed in that middle bracket. And it'd be interesting to know what we're doing around some of that stuff. And maybe that's just an annual report. So, you know, what are the health and safety reps picking up? Are there trends in certain things? Like one of the biggest risks in this building is the use of technology, these screens, and the lighting that surrounds them. But that can often go missed while you're dealing with other issues.
Nobby, thank you for that. And it probably builds on a bit of my delight in hearing from Steve. And Peter, perhaps between you and Steve, somewhere you could consider, I think Nobby's idea is a good one, or request is a good one. I don't want to make it formal at this stage. But certainly as a committee, I'm very concerned that the Health and Safety Committee feel they have our support. So one of the ways in which we can show some support is to be interested in what's coming up through their work program in the way that Nobby's saying at a high level. So if I could stick between you, Steve, and Peter, perhaps in the new triennium, think about how we could do that, that I would appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like, I think we are actually working towards a new reporting structure through our reps that which basically takes information from our front line right through to the health and safety corporate level. So we should be able to reflect that in the next report.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Peter. I'd like to move to the motion, please, which is that we receive the report. We note the work that's being done on site by senior managers, and we note the summary of key incidences and their findings following an ICAM investigation. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Rangi. Thank you, Darren. I thought it was your finger was up. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you, Peter. I think you are still there for the internal audit and continuous improvement, mate.
Just a note for the internal audit and continuous improvement, one item that's not mentioned here, Deloitte have recently commenced the rates review. So that'll be in a future report.
So that's coming up. I sort of thought I'd pick that one up. I didn't know they had, perhaps it was that they had commenced it, which is great news. That's good. Thank you, Peter. Are there questions for Peter on this, on his report? Peter, just one question from me. It's a bit of clarity. Again, probably a bit of ignorance from my part, but would be keen, given the matter we're going to consider in PX. I noticed Environmental Health Services and including IANZ. Do we do our own water testing, or do we send it to an external laboratory?
We do our own, Chair.
Right. So the IANZ accreditation would come for our water laboratory would come under the Environmental Health Services.
That was mainly the food.
That's mainly food?
Erin may have better information than me on that one, Chair.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Chair. Out at our Clifton treatment plant, we actually run our own laboratory which does our testing for both our wastewater and our water supply services. To that point, though, with some changes in the standards whilst Tamata Arawai is getting up and running, the team is working through what we need to do to try and avoid any flags on our audit reports going forward. But yes,
You know what I'm
definitely,
getting at. So
definitely
that's fine.
done
But I mean,
in-house.
in a sense of the accreditation, though, they're currently...
It's an accredited laboratory.
Yeah,
We've not had
yeah.
any concerns with their accreditation.
Thank you. Peter, those are for both environmental health service and building compliance. I mean, thank you for characterising them that most are low, but these are a couple of moderate categories here. You've got reasonable comfort that all of the outstanding or the open items are going to be are actively being worked on?
Yes, majority of the building service ones have been closed since the report was drafted. So the next update will show a significant change in those.
Great. Sweet. Thank you. Members, last chance. Yes, Nobby?
Just in relation to page 20 of board books, there's a set of issues being raised by Deloitte at the very top of the table, and just wonder why we've got some that have not been responded to, like sensitive expenditures got 4 issues raised and 1 being closed. Are they sort of work in progress? And the other issues a bit further down below the nice coloured stuff, going from very high through to low. There's a note that says, to date, none of the recommendations of tables 1 and 2, which includes Deloitte's, have caused any inefficiencies or disruption to our processes or services. So I'm not sure what that quite means, because I mean, I would have thought what Deloitte's are raising are some risks. And so if they're raising risks, then if we haven't responded to them, or we don't have work in progress that's close to being responded to or closed off, we still have the risk.
I like your point. Good point. Peter?
The first part, Mr. Chair, the sensitive expenditure, the 3 outstanding will relate to a policy, credit card policy that's in draft and should be coming through later on in the year. The note that I've added down the bottom is just that they're actually not stopping us providing our services to or processes to our ratepayers is the main problem. The main thing I wanted to get across in that note, that the reviews and what they've picked up are not affecting our services that we're providing to the community.
I think Nobby's point, though, Peter, is we might be providing those services with some risk, or at least the lack of continuous improvement. And I guess it really becomes a question, is our existing service we need to continually improve? The question becomes, what's missing? I think it's the point that you're making, Nobby.
Yeah.
I got Michael first, and then Steve, by the looks of it. Thank you.
Through yourself, Chair, just answering Councillor's question. In relation to any that will affect the service that we are providing, they would be deemed as being high anyway. So we treat them with urgency, obviously, and resolution. Then we work our way through from moderate down to low in relation to the Deloitte items. I think from memory, all 7 are currently in action, so we are actually working on all 7. We just haven't closed them off quite yet. Hopefully they will be closed off within the next quarter. So that's kind of our focus, is to keep them tracked and keep them on a focus point throughout each quarter to try and close out whatever coming through in the current audits.
Thank you, Michael. Brilliant. No other questions or comments? Can I move to the recommendation that we received the report? Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Rangi. Thank you, Nobby. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate your effort and work, Matt. Thank you. I suspect Rhiannon. Yes, I thought you might be hiding behind the pillar. Welcome, Rhiannon.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
So I'll take this report as read. It's really an opportunity to update the committee on the process for delivering the annual plan and the stage that we're at in terms of ensuring that our assumptions for the annual plan reflect as far as possible the economic environment, so that you'll see this committee already received, I think at the last meeting, the report from Invercargill, and you'll see in this report the process for updating that and the key elements that we are monitoring on a continuous basis: inflation, interest rates, and the rating base growth. And I'll just note there is an error that the eagle-eyed amongst you may have picked up, where I have in the dates listed them all as 2022, but they are in fact some of those 2023.
I didn't pick that up, so I probably owe you a chocolate fish then, Rhiannon. How's that? So thank you. Good questions for Rhiannon, please. Yes, Nobby.
On page 3 of the report, or 23 of board books, I feel there's some comments here about TY that if we're going to have those comments there, we need to have some basis for having them there. So for argument's sake, it talks about the transmission grid having a capacity to take power north if TY was to close. I've asked questions about this at the mayoral forum as well, and while Transpower have done a line upgrade right across the South Island, we don't have any increased capacity to go across the strait. That's about a $400 million job. So I'm not sure what that means, given that this is an open document. And the fact that Meridian are courting alternative industry users, well, certainly they've, through the mayoral forum again, have given us quite transparent updates on that, and they're quite clear that the work they're doing in the hydrogen space, for example, is complementary to TY. It's not at the expense thereof, and so they've been quite clear about that. They're not moving away from TY. So I'm just a little bit nervous about those statements, I guess.
Thank you for that, Nobby. I wonder, Ian, if you could just reflect on that from what Nobby said on the basis that that's come through the mayoral forum. But I do hear it's relatively public. Yes, Claire? It's from Infometrics. Thank you. I think you are quoting Infometrics, correct?
Yes, so all of these statements are the same as the advice that
this
was
came from
received by the
Infometrics.
committee last meeting.
Okay. So they're not council positions. They're positions that have been reflected to us by external parties. Okay, any other questions? I've got to just.
I will have one.
Okay, go for it, Nobby.
And I think I can recall that coming through Brad Olsen, but I think we should quote him if that's the case, because this is a city council document. It will be seen to be us making a statement.
I think if you look at page 2, the top of the bullet points, it says for reference, here are the key points from the Infometrics report. If you go to page 2 and then the following points, which include the TY comments, are clearly attributed back to that STEM statement, which is Infometrics. I think that's
fine. Thank you.
Sufficient. Rhiannon, oh, yes, Rangi.
Yeah, just one cautionary thing about interest rate predictions from whoever the experts are that we do use and quote. I remember going back to 2014 or 15, we got given an interest rate of 6.5 that our staff had to work with and did all the calculations on, and it turned out to be interest rates went to about 2.5%. So, and that was a bank error in our favour, but you know, like it's just, I really have to have some skepticism about the accuracy of predictions, just purely because historically they have been proven completely wrong. Mm-hmm. You know, and I don't know, you have to work with something, but it's just, I just, you know, can think back to that time where all our work and everything was based around this much higher interest rate, and then all of a sudden it was, you know, it was 180 degrees out. You know, so I just, and I understand that they are working on higher interest rates now, and the trend is that way, but that's the same as it was 6 years ago.
I appreciate your point, Rangi, because actually that gets us close to both what we're going to be asked to resolve, which is the number 3. We don't have a number 1, which is interesting. On up here, which is to recognise the volatility of the position that we're in, which I think is effectively the point that you're recommending. What interests me, Rhiannon, is the financial strategy that we're going to adopt, which is clearly we're going to make some assumptions at a set point of time around interest rates, around inflation, and our financial strategy in effect is that if it goes above and beyond what we plan, we will make savings.
Yes, so you can see in the report that we're using a number of different mechanisms to attempt to deal with the risk that Councillor Porringer is absolutely right is there in terms of predictions are never 100% accurate. So we are using a number of inputs, including Infometrics and the Bill Local Government Cost Index, but also, as the report notes, using this loan that we have that is coming due and will be reset as a real life indicator as well. So coming in towards the end of the year, we will make the assumptions and continue to adjust those. And yes, we are preparing on the basis of cost management, looking at the fees and charges, looking also at the rating based forecast and making that as accurate as we possibly can, as well as the inflation and interest rates overviews.
But at the current position, taking into account that volatility and the suspension of savings, we're anticipating that the annual plan will, given it's, as you quite rightly pointed out, the third year of the LTP, will still be within reasonable bounds that we don't need to consult.
That's what we're anticipating at this point.
Yeah.
But that may obviously change.
When do you have to make that call?
We'll make that call at the end of this calendar year.
It's in this calendar year. Brilliant. What's the size of the debt that matures next year? Is it about 30 odd million?
20 or 30 million.
33 million is the current liability, by the way, but that's why I put 33 there. Yeah, so it's going to be a sizable chunk of our debt.
It's a sizable chunk.
Yeah,
that's at a very low interest rate currently.
Yes, which will have a significant bearing on our cost structures next year. Yes, Rangi?
Oh, just that comment of Rhiannon's about not having to consult. So are you saying, Rhiannon, through the chair, that we'll be hitting a long-term year 3 target of 4% rates increase?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm saying that we anticipate being within the remit of under the significance and engagement policy, not needing to consult on the annual plan. So that doesn't mean exactly 4%. There may be some variation around that.
So what is the tolerance? What's the plus or minus with that? Not that it's going to be minus, but...
I couldn't give you an exact figure at this point, but that would be something that the next council will be needing to assess
but in our
December.
Significance and engagement policy, there must be a sort of a trigger point that if we exceed our predicted rate of increase, that would...
It's not a numerical trigger point.
No, it's not.
No, so it's under the significance and engagement policy. It's the call of the council for every issue to determine whether or not consultation is required. All I'm indicating at this point is that we're not expecting the variation to be of a significant enough size to advise you guys to consult. That may well, though, change because of the volatility of the economic environment.
So this previous one we've gone through that we did consult on, that there was enough changes and discrepancy for us to do that.
The previous annual plan,
in June, yeah.
the primary difference was the fact that you were undertaking an entirely different options around the museum. That was what triggered consultation last time around.
No, that's fine. Thanks.
Thanks, Rhiannon. So thank you for that good, clear statement. It's around judgment, Rangi, and I hear your point, Rhiannon. Even the news today about our foreign currency suggests that, you know, the volatility is significant. So, Rangi, we shouldn't speculate on what decision might have to be made towards the end of the year. All I hear is the runway at the moment is to not consult, but we're keeping that as an open decision going forward. Okay. Any other questions, folk? Yes, Nobby.
Yeah, through the chair. Rhiannon, you listed 3 things that we might need to look at the end of the year. Services was one, rates was the other, and I missed the third one.
Fees and charges.
Oh, fees and charges. Through you, Chair. Sometimes we miss another option there as well, which is to cancel or pause contract projects going forward that we've been using as a base of our 4% prediction. Because while you don't fund projects out of rates, you certainly service the debt out of rates. So I guess that's the 4th option that we may need to face as well.
There your point. That's a lever as well.
Thank you.
Right, thank you for that, Rhiannon. That's very helpful, and it's sobering. Might I say, and I think it's fair, even though we will discuss the whole annual report in PX, could add to that revaluation of our assets and increase in depreciation. So there's going to be some substantial challenges to the year. So we'll worry about. Sorry, it feels like I'm kicking it off, but kicking it down the road. But it will be clearly a critical discussion in December. if not before, as to where things are going. So thank you for that. Thank you, Rhiannon. I appreciate that. Can I move to the resolutions, which is that we received the report, and indeed, a critical point here, we note the risks that we've just been discussing. Do we have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Rangi. Thank you, Bex. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much, Rhiannon. That's great. And I think you're still there for the roadmap to renewal strategic projects, please.
So thank you, Chair. Yes, so this report speaks specifically to the projects within the roadmap to renewal and some of the other major strategic projects in the infrastructure space that Council has within its work programme under the current LTP. So it's really to provide this committee an overview for the key dates around decision making and the implications of any change in structure for the projects that are within the roadmap. Obviously, that at the time of the adoption of the LTP, the auditors noted that it was an ambitious program, but nevertheless, the council, when adopting the LTP, had a vision of what it was wanting to achieve for the city and presented that forward to the community in its roadmap. So this report really is just an opportunity for this committee to reflect on the processes that the new council will need to balance up in terms of considering how it continues to deliver that roadmap and what the implications may be of changing direction. So my colleague Lee from the Project Management Office has really outlined that it is when those projects move into the construction phase that the financial and legal costs become very significant for council of making major changes to projects. Also, there are strategic implications for changing direction fundamentally in terms of the sense of surety that the community has in terms of the direction that council is taking and the projects that it's delivering for the community. So that is what this report is intended to provide.
Thank you, Rhiannon. It's a very helpful report. Rangi.
Just looking at the in the fine print, which can be expanded here in the chart. Just looking at City Streetscape Stage 2. Now, that wasn't in the roadmap to renewal, but it has been added in the previous annual plan. So, looking at that timeline, phase complete December 22. Now, where does, with all this project discussion and everything, where does council have the opportunity to look at these projects and say, hey, we've got to cut the cloth and make it work when, you know, that project timeline wise?
So in terms of the long-term planning process, as the plan exists at the moment, which you may recall was presented to the last Risk and Assurance Committee, the intention is that the new council will have the opportunity in November to really discuss in detail its strategic priorities, whether it believes that the strategic challenges facing the city have changed, and thinking about those within the context of the wellbeing outcomes that it wants to achieve for the city. And then in December, the intention is for the annual plan, if you refer back to the previous report, to be able to discuss in detail what the updated assumptions for the economic environment might mean, and then consider all of council's work programme, including its strategic projects, in terms of the levels of service that it wants to provide to the community. So really November and December this calendar year is the opportunity to discuss those.
And make decisions?
If that is what the council wishes to do.
No, that's cool. No, appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rangi. Any other questions or comments, please? Yes, Nobby?
Two, really, in relation to two projects. On the dashboard, it says for the storage stage for the museum, it says in the fine print there, project fully committed with regard to construction. Now, I asked at the last meeting we had of this committee back on the 25th of August what that actually meant, and I got an assurance from management that nothing would be physically done in relation to that site until November. which ties in with what Rhiannon just said. And I also asked, do we have an exit clause? And the answer was we have exit clauses on all contracts. So I just want to make sure what that actually means, that we have not started that project yet. It's from a construction perspective, because the advice we've been given earlier in this document is excellent. It talks about the 80-20 principle. You don't wait to get halfway through construction before you start pulling the pin, because it creates all kinds of issues. So I just want to have some assurance that we haven't started anything down there by way of construction.
Erin has said something you could help us with, please.
Thank you, Chair. It would probably be helpful for us to have had an asterisk on this one, so I apologise. What that's reflecting is that the project, you're right, the councillor is right, isn't actually into physical construction yet. But elected members may recall that the contract formation for this project is slightly different, where it is a design and build contract, which means although there is a pause point to come back at the end of the design phase, it is I guess a heftier contract that is already in place for that construction period. So is a more difficult one to get out of, given that we have already committed to the construction contract. But construction has not actually commenced.
Yes, Nobby?
So I think I read in the document somewhere that we're at the 60 or 80% design phase. So I just want, again, some clarification that while we might have a joint design and build contract, we haven't got to the build stage yet.
Correct.
Thank you. And the other issues in relation to the CAB redevelopment or refurbishment, and the figures in this report don't stack up with the figures in the last report on the 25th of August. So on the 25th of August one, it said the project was initially earmarked at $16 million. In fact, prior to that it was actually 14. The ETC, which is the estimate to complete, was 26 million. And so that was what was there last meeting in late August. And this one, we've got a budget that says 16 million, so that's the same as the previous report. And then the ETC, which is the estimate to complete, is 1.7, and uncommitted is 14.28. And those figures just don't add up compared to the last report. So I just want to know whether there's been a clawback on the costs there, or some redesign of what we're going to do. And again, at the last meeting, I got assurance from staff that in the 2023 financial year, only 600,000 would be committed to this project, and the remaining amount, which is best part of 24 point something million, was in the following 2 years. And I just want to make sure that's still the case.
You're in a position to help, please.
I just need to go take away and check those numbers with regard to the previous report and report back to the committee.
Thank you. That would be grateful. I'd be grateful if you could do that. Thank you. That's a response coming back, Nobby. Any other points or questions?
No, just those two issues. Thank you.
Rhiannon, one of the things, and it may be perhaps for future reporting, I was very grateful for the analysis of the risks. But they're said here generically, as far as I can see. Do you have any sense of where I would rate those risks at this stage? It probably needs to be, it could either be overall, and that might be as much about the PMO, but it might also be on a project by project basis. I was just wondering if you could characterise for me any of the sort of status of those risks.
Well, I know that those risks are characterised within the corporate risk schedule, but apologies, Chair, I couldn't tell you at this point.
I suspect that's fine, and no drama. It's not. I'm not being critical. I just would like to reflect going forward. I would be interested to get a level of characterisation, please, then of, as I call it, of those risks, because they're probably the real thing that we as a committee should be worried about. You're quite right about a corporate risk register, but we don't see that. So, Michael, are you going to correct me or help?
Through yourself, Chair. The risks that are included in this report are designed around the roadmap for the renewal, so it's about delivery of the roadmap, not about the individual projects. The individual projects, we come back with a PMO report that we present to this committee on a cyclical basis, and that's got the risks associated to each individual project in it, so at the more granular level. This one was more focused about what are we doing around the renewals program as a total. about the roadmap to renewal.
And so so that really was the first way I talked about my question, Michael, was what's the nature, what's the relative status of these risks to the overall program? I'd be interested in that going forward, if that's possible.
We can add that in.
Because I think that's because I'm sure, Rangi, your committee's all over the individual project by project, which is still valuable to see. I wouldn't want that taken out, but I would like to see it within the context of our renewal program. Yes, Rangi?
I would say from a governance point of view, come November, that council does sit down and have a really open book look, a really clinical look at the way forward. Seriously, I see that as the risk is November, where the decisions are made, the information provided, the financials provided, because really what we decide in November, we need to commit to. But that's going to be a lot of work involved. I just feel that at the moment I'm very, very wary of where we are currently. But knowing that November is an opportunity to have another look at it, then that gives me confidence. But that would be that's a very important time. I don't know. Can I ask Mr. Day if he thinks that's relative?
Look, I don't know unless management would like to respond. I think, Rangi, that I would say it's clear from Rhiannon's prior paper that obviously as we go into the annual plan and dare I say it, not too far away going into the next LTP, while this is a really important program we've started, we've got to consider it in light of the financial position and projected position going forward. So I suspect there will have to be in some form, I don't know the date, but some form of serious thing. Michael, have you got a point you'd like to make there?
No, just through yourself, Chair. I was just going to actually make the same comments. It is through the annual plan process that will be around that same timeline that you're talking about, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rangi. Nobby, you had a question?
Yeah, just two follow-up questions, I guess. Aaron just stated that I will need to come back to you. When's the comeback? Is it today?
I'm sure it'll be as soon as possible, Nobby. I'm quite
No, but
comfortable
I
she'll
guess
come back.
what I'm concerned about is we're running out of meeting space, and I mean, there's no secret that some people around this table are lobbying for a pause on that museum storage, and I'm one of them. I guess so. When we hear the November review of projects, I don't want that museum project to be too far down the track that we can't exercise our rights to pause it. So
Mr. Chair, the museum storage project was not a project on which Aaron undertook to come back to you. There was a memo that was distributed to you all the week before last while I was away that gave an absolute update on exactly where that is at.
Yep.
And it was explained, and it remains correct, that there is a 100% design portion at which there is a pause for council to make a deliberate decision. Aaron undertook to come back to you in relation to the CAB, and my interpretation of that was that that would be by memorandum, because it would be something that would be in writing, and that will be done before the end of the term.
Thank you. Any other questions folk would like to raise, please? As I go into this, I just would like to note 3 there, which is an important one. That's why I've come back to the risk issue, by the way. So, Michael, I appreciate this about the total project. The way we make our decisions going forward are important from that third one we haven't discussed much, which is our reputational risks. That's why I liked the characterisation of the risks at that high level. You know, do we have the right information, etc. Becomes really, really important. So I'll be very keen to see how that one goes. So look, I'd like to go to the recommendations, if I could, please, that we receive. We note the Project Manager Officer Roadmap Renewal, blah, 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 update. And we note the strategic, financial and reputational risks. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Darren. Any discussion on the motion? I'll put it then. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you, Rhiannon. Appreciate your time. Right, financial risks. Gee, it's all about the R word, isn't it? I suppose that's fair enough for a risk and assurance committee. Patricia, in your hands.
Okay, so this is the. So make it closer. This is really the sensitive expenditure which didn't come to the last month's meeting because we tried to tie as much of the triennium into the last quarter. So it's the sensitive expenditure listing from 1 April to 9th of September. as well as we have also included the net debt movements across each of the net debt accounts for the financial year. It does include things like the Animal Control Fund, which was discussed at PPP last week, but it does show how that movement, so we've had a 14.9 million increase in our net debt position, so our debt has increased by 14.9, and that's made up of a number of different moving parts within there. The current surplus, which is predominantly from capital subsidies, adjustments for depreciation, our capital expenditure, the sale of assets, and our drawdown of our loan to ICL, which gives that 14.9 million. I'll take any questions from anyone.
Right, thank you for that. Are there any, I think it would be good to take this as two items. One is to firstly just quickly have a chance for members to comment on the sensitive expenditure, and then we'll revert back to the net debt balances and also the the net debt account balances. Are there any questions around or points around sensitive expenditure people like to make, Darren?
Thanks, Chair. Can I just check that the airfares next to my name for LGNZ were recovered because the flights were cancelled?
I will double check, but we tend to find the credits come much later than the debits hit.
My experience too. Thank
As
you.
an experienced traveller, I can support that view. Actually, Patricia, thanks for that question, Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see I'm the only councillor listed in March 22 as an LGNZ conference, and I'm a little bit surprised at that.
I think it's just when everyone's costs came through.
No, the next page has got the LGNZ conference under me as well in the right month. The March 22 is just a bit of a surprise.
Okay, I will double check it, but
yeah, you'll see on the next page it's listed in June 22, which is legitimately, of course, correct. But the March 22, is.
You're right, and down below, you got course fees 1249.
22, which
yes, thank you.
One's airfares and the other's the conference, though.
No, it's not airfares. No.
They're the same amount.
The A22
Councillor Soto is listed 3 times.
I'm going to say I've got you.
Yes.
I've got you in April 22.
It seems very unusual. I've listed 3 times.
Yeah.
That or else you're a sucker for punishment to go to the conference video. That's all I can say there.
There weren't 3 conferences.
Thank you, Leslie, and appreciate that. That is important to get it, particularly for this report, to get it accurate. So if we could just ask Patricia that you update the record so that it, quite reasonably, Leslie is only there for the one time. Any other comments that people like to make about sensitive expenditure? Obviously reflects conference season, dare I say it, and some important other matters going on around that where people have been on the road, in particular for council, so it looked reasonable to me. Any other questions? There being none, can we go to the net debt account, please, and check if there are any questions about this? And Patricia, I slightly missed a bit. You said there's already been some explanation of at least one of these accounts. Is that right? Correct?
So there was a paper on the animal control one.
Right, okay. So are there any other comments or questions people would like to raise over the net debt account? Yes, Nobby.
Just probably a wider one that we've discussed before, which is around our net debt limits and whether going forward we will breach the limit of 150%. And we've had reports to say that we will for a short period of time. It was interesting to listen to commentary about Auckland City this morning on TV. They've got a AA rating, which is one slot below us. We're AA plus. Their current debt level against NZFA criteria is 290%, the limit being 300%. And it was interesting that one of the candidates said, your rating is not about how well you manage your budget, it's just your ability to pay. And given that councils have an ability to put up rates to any limit that they're brave enough to do, that's what drives the financial rating. I thought that was interesting because we've sometimes got a little bit conservative about that 150%. And it was set at a time when the maximum was 200%, where the maximum is actually 300% now. So whether we need to inch that somewhere along the line is maybe for the next council. And I'm not suggesting we get into further debt, not that at all. It's time to be prudent, but just thought that issue's come up again, I think.
Thank you. Do you have a comment?
That is one of the the issues that the new council will have to look at around both the annual plan and for annual plan and long-term plan.
Sure.
As we relook at the financial strategy.
It's a very, very good point, Nobby, and indeed it's the ability to pay. I mean, when you look at net debt, clearly the key number is the headline of what you said yourself, and you said it's 150%. You also got to, and I think you already referred to it in a previous paper, it's the ability of the ratepayer to bear the interest costs that go with it.
Yeah.
So there's generally, well, there is actually, as we'll again get to with the annual report, a requirement for it to be less than 10% of your total revenue. So there are the prudential limits that you should take into account when you're considering net debt. If I could just make a comment about Auckland, which I have an interest in, just remember they're a growth council.
Yep.
And indeed they're one of the councils that under our GFA rules can go to 300. But it's a sinking lid policy. They've got to reduce it by 5% over the next couple of years. So there is some prudential discipline there on the growth councils as well. They need to go to that limit just to try and
I mean, I think
service growth.
it's fair to say that we've been conservative in the past, and with conservatism, sometimes you don't have the facilities that you might like to see in your community. But when we get to what we're at the moment financially, we're actually in a much better position for our community. You can just compare us with Dunedin. There's two good examples.
No, that's a good point, Nobby, and Patricia's quite right that as you put everything into the melting pot for the annual plan, your funding and financing policies, which would include debt, become again one of those centerpieces of the decision you've got to make. Now, I had a couple of hands. Somebody, was it you, Darren? Yes, and then I've got Rangi, I think.
No.
Thanks, Chair. My comment was really that once we get some clarity around asset ownership as well, that's the other part of that equation that we'll need to take into account when looking at that review of the debt strategy.
Yes, thank you. Right, any other questions folk would like to raise? Being none, can I move to the recommendations, please, that we receive the report. We receive, in accordance with the sensitive expenditure policy, the sensitive expenditure listing. I think just for the benefit of Leslie, we should note with minor corrections to be added. If I could just leave it at that, please, because I think it's important given the nature of this report. And we approve the $14.9 million increase in the net debt account balances. Can I just check before I ask for a mover and a seconder? Can we approve? Is it within my remit? I meant to go back to my terms of reference as to whether I could approve a net balance. I don't know whether I can. Sorry, I am characterising it as the committee. Sorry, that's a bit. I think we need to note. I would be more comfortable with. I think approving would be the matter for council, and council with its financial strategy head on board.
So to that degree, Mr. Chair, it'd be wise for you to add, you note that and recommend to council the approval of.
Yes, I think that's a fair point. I'm happy for that. Thank you for that sage advice. Well, seeing I've put that slight change here, I'll move these motions, please. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Rangi. Is there any discussion on the motions? Been a bit naughty. I've just gone straight to reword it rather than look for an amendment, but we'll do it that way. Okay, all those in pardon?
Nothing had been put.
I'll put it now though. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you for that, Patricia. That's very helpful. Right now, I guess probably I should speak to this, if that's okay. Although, Michael, is there anything that you would want to add at the start, or you help me, or Rhiannon actually, Rhiannon helped me with this at the start. Is there anybody comments staff would like to make before I put a couple of my chair colours on top of this one? No? Okay, sweet. Look, thank you. This was really, I was about to say my initiative, therefore I've got to take responsibility if for those of you that didn't want to fill this in. Can I firstly say thank you to the other 7 that did? I was the 8th. So my appreciation, and that's also to staff, because I understand there would be some staff amongst that as well. I want to reflect that it is important that we do something of a check of our performance. And it's done in different ways around the different committees I'm on, but I tend to like this to achieve a baseline, and I think it has actually brought out some useful points to take forward with the new council. I just want to reflect though that my opening comments said my appreciation to staff, because I think you've allowed us to develop the nature of the committee's work. I know there was a couple of challenges around the scope of the committee's work, but that might be a debating point, which I'm happy to have in this course of this. But we are on a development journey. Terrible phrase, but I'm going to use it. Thank you that you guys have come with us on that. We've got a way to go. And I would want to say the glaring hole for this committee is a proper quarterly risk report. And I know that that's being progressed, but I don't want to reflect that we are at a good level, but we need to do better, in my view. I think there's just a couple of other points I'd like to note. Firstly, there's also a time to review the terms of reference, and actually, my view, the agenda of the committee. What do we do? And I've had, perhaps at the humorous end of the scale, some question about the time we take with this meeting. So it does say, what is the agenda? What do we do? That would be reasonably important. And I also note the importance of induction, coming up with the new triennium, and actually what does this committee do, and how do the other members of the council relate to the work of the committee. So with those comments, I'm very grateful, Rhiannon, that you ran this for me, please, and we've got the results here. I would open up for members' comments or questions. In fact, if I can invite senior management, if you had any questions or points you'd like to make, I'm very open to hearing those as well, because I did ask you guys to be part of the review, Claire. So if there's any comments, please raise them. Stony silence. Yes, Nobby.
Well, that opens it up for my term. A couple of reflections, I guess, Bruce. This committee's grown significantly in its work, and I wonder when we look to the terms of reference next time, it seems to me if you want to put a lens across everything we do in council, there's always a risk. Every piece of work has got a risk to it. And I just wonder whether we need a bar over which stuff comes to this committee. Otherwise, this committee just gets bigger and bigger and longer and longer. I mean, the time's not the issue for me. It's just that it seems to me that we put papers in some cases to the two chairs, Darren and Rangi, and then that comes here as well. And I wonder whether there's some way of having a division on that. So if either the chair's got a piece of work, that what they'd refer on here is just the risk component, not the whole paper. It just seems that in some cases we actually go through a committee to here and then to full council, which we've got today. And it just seems we're double and triple dipping, and I'm not sure whether we get advantage out of that. The other issue for me is I'd like some breakdown of who completed the survey. I don't want names. That's totally inappropriate. But it saddens me that we've got a potential group of people who should be filling in the survey that you and Rhiannon did. And by my assessment, if you include Mana Whenua, it's 22, and we've got 8 replies. And so I'd like to know what the breakdown was for our elected group, because I think that's a dismal result, and that's no reflection on you or Rhiannon. I just think it's
5 governance and 3 management.
5 governance. Okay.
Page 43.
Yeah. It really needed to be more than that. I mean, and we've had an example of that in the past, which I won't go into, but that's not helpful when important issues like this, the future of this committee and what it does, has such a poor attendance.
That's partly why I was keen, Nobby, to have start this as a process, assuming the committee continues, because it is important that we look at our effectiveness.
Yeah.
Can I comment on your just on the agenda? And I agree. I'll be honest with you. We're a bit hamstrung because we don't have a proper quarterly risk reporting at this stage, and I describe that as fact, not as a qualitative statement. I think once we start that, Nobby, it will better, in my experience, characterise what is the genuine work of the committee. I think it has been pretty genuine, but if I was to go back to the PMO project one, you can see I think the valid interest on any form of sort of high risk perspective of this council is our capacity to undertake our capital program. I can be honest with you now, I would say just about every committee, certainly that I'm on, but certainly every council will have capital program delivery as a major risk. But that's why I wanted to focus on the 4 bullet pointed risks, or 5, whatever number it was. That's the primary area. The project by project is of interest, but that's why I said, Rangi, I presume you guys deal with this on a detailed basis in whatever way you choose to in the course of your committee. So I'm agreeing with your point, but I'm saying we don't have the mechanism to really craft that until we get on top of the quarterly risk report. Sorry, what are our big risks? What should we be monitoring? Which would give rise then to the quarterly risk report.
And I guess that's what I was alluding to. That regardless of whether we've got a finance committee or not, and some do have that. You'd expect the risk associated with the project would be part of a finance lens, which would be monthly, but maybe quarterly there'd be some stuff coming through to this committee that says, hey, we've got some serious risk here.
Agreed. I think we're more or less on the same path, but it just reflects the development end of where we're going. Michael, I think you've got a comment.
Yes, thank you. Through yourself, Chair. In response to asking about senior management thoughts and views in relation to the process, I support where we're heading towards in relation to bringing in that risk framework, obviously. I think, as being the preparer of the agenda for this whole triennium, pretty much, it has been about going into the detail over that time when we didn't have the risk framework in place, building through while we develop the risk framework to a point where hopefully that can start to come in. So exactly the sentiments what the Chair has just expressed is exactly what we've been trying to do and build towards. So hopefully we can bring the reporting to a higher level as soon as that comes into place, and we can take away some of those more detailed reports that we have in there at the moment. I know my team will appreciate it if we start to pull some of those reports out, because I throw a lot of work their way in relation to this. And we have, I think, over the course of this year, brought some summary reports in rather than multiple detailed reports. So we've started to go down that journey. I think we'll go a bit further in the next period.
Thank you, Michael. I've got Ross, Darren, and then Leslie.
I was going to make a comment that I think the terms of reference don't need changed. I think it's a reflection of the governance structure of council over the past couple of years that is by default added to this agenda, and I think the new triennium may well see some change there.
Thank you, Ross. Darren, I think you've passed. Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. As one of the councillors who attends this meeting who's not actually appointed to the committee, I just wanted to comment because it was raised that there was a low return to the survey, and I acknowledge all councillors were given the opportunity, but my feeling is that councillors who have never attended this committee saw no point in responding to the survey and didn't feel that they were able to do so. And what that actually raises for me is the importance of this committee does make me wonder whether it is one of those committees that all councillors should be appointed to in the future. That's just seemed to me, because the comment was made as though there was something really bad about a relatively low response. I actually think councillors who have not attended this committee, who are not appointed to it, probably did not see that they were in a position to make the response.
But if you take the 5 governance and 2 of those were Bruce and I, that only leaves 3 that did respond.
Right. Look, I think without being trying to count the numbers at the stage, Leslie, your points, can I just say, is correct from my perspective, which is how well understood is our work, and that's why, amongst other things, you'll see in the recommendations book, which I think are very good, that we need to embed risk management training generally within the council book, particularly within the council induction program. It certainly would be a question on the assumption that we continue with a risk and assurance committee, which would be my strong recommendation, as I say, if I can't do that with a bit of self-interest. Look, I'd leave it open as to whether a new committee, one of this is a committee of the whole. Traditionally, risk committees are a subcommittee or a smaller grouping of the total council, supplemented by independents such as Ross and myself. I have also worked with committees of the whole, so that would be a preference of the new council that would have to consider seriously. Did you have your hand up running?
I did, but I think you've answered about 80% of my question through your
80-20
experience.
is a pretty good rule.
Yeah.
Can I have, sorry.
So with your experience on other risk and assurance committees, the makeup of them tends to be a subcommittee type style. Is that right?
Yeah, look, it depends a wee bit. Some are subcommittees of the Finance Committee. I think that actually obscures things a wee bit personally.
Yeah.
To be a committee of council is actually helpful, but that's just probably as much a personal preference as anything else in the way it works. No, it is actually probably a case of preference. I mean, why do you have committees that are smaller? It tends to be for good efficiency reasons, and amongst other things also, how shall I put it? It tends to be built like this, where you've got some of the senior members of council that exist. And Leslie, thank you for being one of the 2 or 3 that I know that come regularly to various committees around the country. I appreciate your effort on that. But it tends to be seen as the way to deal with it. But committees as a whole are the other option.
Thanks.
Right. Well, I think we take this forward as useful information. It's given us, I think, I'll characterise it as a tick of approval, but I think we're all acknowledging, and we would want the message that there are developments that need to occur. The big risk, strategic risk approach is obviously one that we are self-acknowledging needs to be worked on, part of which will then give us a stronger key to what is the role that the committee can play going forward. But I also want to just pick up Leslie's point that we think seriously about how this committee's work relates to the governing body as a whole, which makes sense. Can I move to the recommendations, please? We received the report, and we recommend the following items for the consideration in the new traineum. In terms of reference, risk training, which includes the council induction program. We consider the work of the committee. We've discussed that at some length. We continue to support management to mature the approach around the quarterly risk report. Probably I'd just like to change that word, if I could, Malika, to strategic risk management, because I think that's where we want to start from. It would happen quarterly, it just happens to be how you do it, but it's actually what we're doing is strategic risk management, please. And I just need you to scroll down for me, please. Oh no, that's it, that's D, sorry, so that's the last one, isn't it? So we just, if we're happy to change that to strategic risk management and reporting, including a review of the categorisation and contents of reporting linked to the financial risk. And actually, I've got a third one, if it's okay, Malika, can we forward this report to council?
Mr. Chair, can I ask, in view of the time frame in the triennium, do you mean forward the report to council for its formal consideration, or do you mean circulate the report to all elected members?
I'm relaxed. I'm making, I suppose to some extent, actually, when I think about it, my suggested wasn't on the cuff, sorry, but on the, I presume the recommend the fine items to the new mayor means that it will make its way to the new mayor and the new council.
It will make its way.
Okay, in which case, forget number 3. Thank you for the correction. That's good. Rightio, I've moved it. So do I have a second, please? Thank you, Nobby. Are there any discussion on the motions? There aren't. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Right, I just need to check where we're at. I think we're up to item 12, which is actually urgent business. I have been informed of none, so we can go to now the motion to exclude the public, and for the reasons that have been stated there. And I just want to check, Malavika, do we need to pass motion who stays and doesn't?
No.
I think we're okay, aren't we? We know who. I'll move from the chair that for the reasons that are stated there that we move into public excluded. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Bex. Any discussion on the motion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Can I just suggest that we take a short break while we get the live streaming off? Folk may like